Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Derek J407 here to give you my thoughts on WWE Elimination Chamber 2020 live from the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The last stop on the road to WrestleMania, just coming up 4 weeks from today, as of this recording, at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. At least as of right now, unless the city forces WWE to cancel WrestleMania due to the coronavirus. But yeah, we have this show here, Elimination Chamber, a show that did not feature names such as Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre, neither world champion or Universal or World, no Goldberg, no Brock Lesnar. None of those big names were on the show. We had two chamber matches, one for the tag team titles on SmackDown and the other for the right to face the Raw Women's Champion at WrestleMania. And the rest of the card were basically a lot of undercard, mid-card matches that took up the entire pay-per-view. Now, going into this show, knowing all of that, you would think, okay, well, such low expectations for a show like this. Usually at times like that, when there are such low expectations going into a show, the show ends up delivering. And I would have to say that on the whole, this show delivered for me. There were a lot of really great matches. There was a really strong wrestling match to start the show with Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak. The Tag Team Championship Chamber match was excellent. You had a pretty good match with Aleister Black and AJ Styles. The Raw Tag Team title match was pretty good for the most part. The U.S. title match with Andrade and Humberto was pretty damn good. You had the IC title change hands. And then you had that main event that made Shayna Baszler look like a monster. I think that's the only nice thing I can say about that main event. The show was really damn good and would have gotten a full thumbs up from me until that main event. But we will get to that as we go through this whole show. The show does get a thumbs up from me, but it was not as enthusiastic as it was before that main event was over. Or at least before we got to a certain point in that match when it's like, okay, I see what they're doing here. But like I said, in due time, we'll get to that. Let's start off talking about the kickoff show. One thing I wanted to mention was on the kickoff show panel, they have, the panel of hosts and stuff. They had David Otunga, Jonathan Coachman, Charlie Caruso. Usually they have Sam Roberts on there, but this time they had Peter Rosenberg, who just recently confirmed that he was hired back to WWE or whatever. He returned, he was rehired, I don't know what the situation was, but he was brought back in and he was on this show. I only mention it because Peter Rosenberg did a pretty good job on what little I saw of him on the panel, and he did a good job solely based on the fact that he was not Sam Roberts, who is god-awful. And that's all I have to say about that. The pre-show match was the Viking Raiders versus Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. The Viking Raiders won, and that's all I have to say about that match. The show kicked off with Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak. A match that's been built up for the last few weeks on SmackDown. Drew Gulak claims, or at least he was claiming heading into this match, that he knew all of Daniel Bryan's weaknesses. He was scouting Bryan. He was studying his, in-ring ability ever since Bryan lost to The Fiend. That seems like a lifetime ago, considering what has gone on with The Fiend since then. But ever since The Fiend, Daniel Bryan has been a little off in his game, and Drew Gulak has noticed weaknesses. So Bryan challenged Gulak to a match to see if he could exploit those weaknesses. And in this match, we had a match where that was pretty much the main crux, or the main story behind the match. For basically everything that Daniel Bryan was doing, a lot of the maneuvers that he was trying to put on, Gulak had an answer for all of it. He was countering a lot of Bryan's moves. He had different elements that, or moves that Bryan was trying to execute, Gulak ended up executing them and did it better than Bryan. So it was a good story being told here. Bryan was doing everything he could to make Gulak look like he was on his level. He was very giving in this match. So giving to the point where he almost gave out on us and almost died in the middle of that ring. There was one spot, you all know what I'm talking about, where Drew Gulak hit a huge German suplex on Daniel Bryan and flung Daniel Bryan backwards, and when Bryan, he was in midair, and when he crashed down, he landed right on the back of his neck and head, and it looked disgusting. Ignoring the fact that Bryan has a history of neck injuries, ignoring the fact that he had to retire for 3 or 4 years due to multiple concussions, ignoring all of that, on anyone else, that would have been an ugly spot. On Daniel Bryan, it's fucking terrifying. So, Bryan rolled out to the outside of the ring. You had to think that that was not planned. I think Gulak went for a cover or something like that, and he was kind of pulling his head up, checking on him, I guess. So Bryan was down. He eventually did beat the count. So he got back into it, and he came back and started hitting his moves like normal, like nothing ever happened. I don't know if that was just lack of selling on Bryan's part, or just him, it not beating him and taking him down too much. But whatever it was, he came back into it. So we started setting up for the finish. Both men are up top. Gulak hits a huge inverted superplex off the top rope, locks Bryan in the Dragon Sleeper. He tries to form it into his own submission, the Gulak, but Bryan countered that into the Yes Lock, and Gulak didn't tap out. He passed out. He passed out to the move. That was it. Bryan got the win. Big win for, well, not that big. It was over Drew Gulak. But Daniel Bryan won. After the match, he was clapping and applauding and pointing at Drew Gulak, endorsing him. So this match was solely designed for Daniel Bryan to present Drew Gulak as his equal. And in the context of this match and the way this match was played out, I would say he succeeded in doing that. So, really good match. The crowd was into a lot of stuff that Gulak was doing. Of course, Drew Gulak is from Pennsylvania, so he had a lot of cheers from the crowd. But I don't know where they're going with this. If we can extract that scary as hell spot with Bryan landing on his neck, and if you just have the match as is, I'd love to see another one. And knowing this company, will probably see a rematch on SmackDown this week. Up next was the United States Championship on the line. Andrade defending against Humberto Carrillo. Humberto getting yet another shot at Andrade's U.S. Championship, and yet again failing at winning the U.S. Championship. The bell rung, and as soon as the match started, Andrade went in and hit that running, spinning back elbow, and we were kind of off to the races at that point. This was a very quick action, fast-paced action type match. At one point, Zelina Vega, she pulled up the mats on the outside floor to expose the concrete, setting up for Andrade to hit his hammerlock DDT on Humberto on the concrete, a move that Andrade did to Humberto late last year, and then Humberto, returned the favor by doing it to Andrade just about a month and a half ago, which sent Andrade on his 30-day vacation. So, went for it. Andrade went for the DDT again, but Humberto slipped out of it, hit a backdrop, got back in the ring. The referee, he was leaning outside the ring through the middle rope, checking on Andrade and Zelina. Humberto dove over the referee, dove to the outside, and crash landed on Andrade. The finish saw a series of roll-up counters and different things like that. When Andrade got the final roll-up and rolled up Humberto, had a handful of tights, and got the win. So Humberto fails to win the U.S. Championship again, and Andrade retains. I don't know how you justify Humberto getting another shot, but despite that, I do see them setting up a fatal four-way match for WrestleMania with Andrade, Humberto Carrillo, Angel Garza, and Rey Mysterio for the U.S. Championship, with Angel Garza probably being the one to win the title. So that's my early prediction there. Good match, like I said, really nice, fast-paced match. But yeah. Up next was the Elimination Chamber match for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. We had the champions John Morrison and The Miz defending against Heavy Machinery, Otis and Tucker, The New Day, Kofi Kingston and Big E, Jimmy and Jay, The Usos, Lince Dorado and Gran Metalik, the Lucha House Party, and of course the team who won the right to be the final entrants in this match, Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode. The match started out with The New Day and the Usos. They mixed it up a little bit. Eventually, Lucha House Party came in, botched some double Hurricane Ranas on Big E and Kofi. So you thought, okay, this is going to be pretty sloppy. But pretty soon afterwards, the Lucha House Party became the stars of this match. At one point, both men, Dorado and Metalik, were on the top of a pod, and they both did separate dives off. I believe it was Lince who hit a diving crossbody off the top onto the chamber floor, onto the Usos. Meanwhile, Metalik hit a huge dive off the pod into the ring, landing on Kofi and Big E. Miz and Morrison were the next out, and the crowd kind of took a quick nap at this point. They were not really into things too much, but they started to come alive a little bit, especially once again in part due to the Lucha House Party. Gran Metalik was on the top of another pod, and he came off the pod and hit a Hurricane Rana on John Morrison, who was on the top turnbuckle. So off the pod, Hurricane Rana, John Morrison off the turnbuckle, down into the ring. The crowd's alive, and they're woken up even more with the entry of Heavy Machinery. This Mandy Rose storyline has made Otis a complete star, and it has also rubbed off on Tucker, to where they come in and they are the most beloved tag team in this entire match. They start beating down everyone, giving people compactors and just bum rushing everyone. They were smashing the Usos up against the chain wall. They were a house of fire. But eventually, the other team started to gang up on them and beat them down. They're all clustered in the ring. Meanwhile, Lince Dorado, who climbed up on top of a pod and then disappeared after a while, resurfaced as he was hanging from the top of the Elimination Chamber ceiling, the top chamber part, and as he's hanging, he flips off, basically hits like a 450 all the way off the top, landing all the way down. It did look goofy with everyone looking up and basically waiting for him to come down. That looked incredibly goofy. But this man is however many freaking feet up in the air, doing a flip all the way down, crashing into all of you. I would probably be looking up too. I'm just saying. It did look goofy, but hey, that's what it was. Heavy Machinery hit the compactor on Gran Metalik, though, to get the elimination. And the Lucha House Party was gone. They turned their attention to Roode and Ziggler, who were yet to come in. And once they were about to come in, Miz and Morrison took down Otis and Tucker, and the four men kind of teamed up on Otis and Tucker. But eventually, that wore off. So we got Dolph Ziggler climbing on top of a pod to avoid Otis and was running away from him. On the other side, Tucker climbs up the wall and gets on top of the pod. He rams Dolph's face into the glass and then throws him down into the waiting arms of Otis. Meanwhile, on the other side, Tucker does his own dive off the top of the pod and lands on everyone else who's on the other side. So Otis has Dolph down. Roode came in and tried to break it up a little bit, but he got rid of Roode. He has Dolph lined up right in front of a pod. He's going to charge at him. So Otis charges at Dolph. Dolph sidesteps and moves out of the way. And Otis not only charges into the glass pod, the plexiglass pod, notice the air quotes here. You don't see them, but I'm doing them. The plexiglass pod. He rams himself into the pod, but in doing so, also falls out of the chamber. Michael Cole on commentary mentioned how this was probably the first time that ever happened. Honestly, I think I've seen every single Elimination Chamber match in history. I do not remember that happening in any other match. So, kudos on something innovative like that. Got a big pop from the crowd. This pissed off Tucker, who set his sights on Rude and Ziggler, he was feeding off of the emotion and adrenaline and just anger, but it was 2-on-1, so it was too much for him to overcome. Super kick from Dolph into a glorious DDT from Robert Roode eliminates Heavy Machinery. The fans are just drowning Dolph and Roode with boos until they got disposed of as well. Trouble in Paradise on Dolph, a big ending on Roode, and a double Uso splash from both Usos off of two separate pods onto Roode and Ziggler. Both get pinned and both get eliminated. The fans rejoiced. They were really into Otis and Tucker and hated Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode, basically for Dolph stealing Mandy Rose from Otis. So they got the nah, hey, hey, goodbye stuff. So whatever's going on with Otis and Dolph is working. It is definitely working. So the Usos and New Day and Miz and Morrison were all that were left. Eventually, Kofi tried to hit a dive from the top of a pod. Again, another dive from the top of a pod. Kofi tries to hit a dive, but this time, no one's home. He misses. He was going for it on the Usos, but the Usos moved out of the way. Miz and Morrison ran in and both covered Kofi to eliminate the New Day. So it came down to the Miz, John Morrison, and the Usos. So a lot of back and forth here. There was a figure four on, I believe it was Jey Uso, if I'm not mistaken. Miz locked in the figure four on him, and then Morrison hit a Starship Pain. Was going for the cover. I thought that was it, but then the other Uso, Jimmy, he broke it up. So more fighting, and then I don't know which Uso it was, but they got kind of caught up in a sunset flip pin from Morrison. Meanwhile, Miz had his feet on the ropes, kind of leaning off the ropes and clamping down on the pin to eliminate the Usos and retain the tag team titles for himself and John Morrison. The champs retain and keep their titles. Pretty predictable in that regard, but still a great match. The stuff with Otis and Dolph was tremendous. The Lucha House Party were the MVPs of the match at certain points, although the crowd was pulling for Otis and Tucker to win. And if we're not going to get an Otis-Dolph Ziggler singles match at WrestleMania, I know that was the rumor a few weeks back when a leaked WrestleMania card, which has proven to be fake, at least certain parts of it. But on that card, it showed Otis and Dolph having a singles match with Mandy Rose being the special referee. We could still be heading in that direction, but if not, we need another multi-man match that involves Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode and Heavy Machinery for the tag team titles, with Otis pinning Dolph Ziggler and winning the tag team titles for himself and Tucker. The end game either has to be Otis getting Mandy or Otis and Tucker winning the tag team titles. It has to be one or the other. So I don't know which one is more important. Maybe they can both happen somehow at WrestleMania. I don't know. But I like what they're doing. Otis is probably my favorite babyface on SmackDown, and maybe even in the entire company right now. Up next was a no disqualification match between AJ Styles and Aleister Black. Very dull in the early part. AJ was working over Aleister's knee, and it's like, this is a no disqualification match. It just followed that awesome chamber match, and you have AJ Styles and Aleister Black, and your big idea to start this no disqualification match is for AJ to just work over Aleister's knee. That was pretty lame, but things picked up slowly. They picked up. There was a chair introduced, a kendo stick was used. Aleister Black set up a table, and it was kind of put off to the side, saved for later. AJ teased hitting a tombstone pile driver on Aleister to kind of further the feud between AJ Styles and The Undertaker that started at Super Showdown. But Black slipped out of it. He kneed AJ Styles, and when doing so, AJ kind of landed backwards into the corner and landed into a chair that was kind of wedged in the turnbuckle. I think AJ set it up. They go to the outside. AJ has Aleister up on the announce table. He's going for a suplex off of the announce table onto the floor, or through the table that was set up there, because it was set up right in front of the announce table. But Aleister managed to slip out of that. He kicked AJ's legs from underneath him, and then when AJ fell off the table, he landed face first on the announce table. So he's standing up, and Aleister, off of the announce table, hits a Meteora and sends AJ through the table. So back in the ring, finally Gallows and Anderson, who were on the outside the entire time and provided no interference, they finally interfered. They came in. Aleister tried to fight them off, but he was telling them, like, come on, I'll fight all of you. So they charged at him. They beat him down. They hit the Magic Killer on him. They held him up in position for AJ to go for the Phenomenal Forearm. And when AJ was on the apron, I should say, gearing up to hit the forearm, the gong hits. The lights go out. They come back on, and the Undertaker is right there in the ring, hands grasping at the throats of Gallows and Anderson as they are cowering down on their knees. As Undertaker he looked pretty badass, I will say. AJ tried to dive into the ring, but Undertaker turned around just in the nick of time, caught him, hit him with a choke slam. Lights went out and came back on, and just like that, the Undertaker was gone. This led to Aleister Black hitting the Black Mass on AJ and getting the win. So, a win for Aleister Black. AJ fallen due to interference from the Undertaker. I assume this is setting up the Undertaker-AJ Styles match at WrestleMania, but it also could be setting up a handicap match where the Undertaker and Aleister Black team up against AJ Styles and Gallows and Anderson. I would honestly prefer that over a singles match between the Undertaker and AJ Styles, because Undertaker in singles matches these days, I'm just not for it. So, hopefully they go that route, but who knows. Raw Tag Team titles up next. The new champions, Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, the Street Profits, defending against Seth Rollins and Murphy. The AOP was on the outside. They interfered for a little bit until the Viking Raiders music hit. They came out and they started a brawl with the AOP. And they brawled all the way to the back. And the AOP were nowhere to be found for the rest of the match. The match itself was good. The match on Raw the previous week was a lot more fun, a lot more interesting than this one was. It was fine, but it was nothing overly exciting. We're getting down the stretch. We hear commotion in the crowd, and walking down out of the crowd from the stands is Kevin Owens with a box of popcorn, just munching and chomping on that popcorn. He makes his way over the barricade and is just kind of sitting up on the announce table. Seth Rollins notices him. He walks over to him, is yelling at him. Owens throws popcorn in his face, and Rollins, the Monday Night Messiah, did not seem to appreciate that, although in focusing only on Owens, he failed to realize that he was about to get the shit knocked out of him, because out of nowhere came Angelo Dawkins, who pounced the hell out of Seth Rollins. Rollins just kind of flew up in the air real quick and then landed into the security wall. Murphy in the ring tries to go for a dive on Ford and Hawkins on the outside, but they catch him and hit him with a buckle bomb. They just throw him into the security wall, throw him back in the ring. Ford up with the frog splash, the best frog splash in the business today. Hits him with it. 1, 2, 3. Street Profits retain their tag team titles, as one would expect them to have done. After the match, Rollins is in the ring. He is getting back to his feet. Owens is in the ring at this point. Rollins turns around and Owens hits him with a stunner. He grabs his popcorn, goes to leave. While leaving, he notices Murphy still on the ground, dumps a little popcorn out on Murphy, and then proceeds to walk to the back. So, had no expectation of Rollins and Murphy regaining the tag team titles. Profits just won them. And I assume they're setting up a match between Rollins and Owens at WrestleMania. Rollins mentioned on Raw the previous week. Owens can name the time and place. He can name the stipulation. So I assume that's coming on Raw this week or at some point in the coming weeks. And whatever match they're going to have at WrestleMania will be the blow-off to this feud, because it needs to be. This feud with Seth and Owens has been going on since really at Survivor Series, but it really kicked into full gear after Survivor Series, like the night after Survivor Series. So that's been late November since this stuff started. I appreciate long-term storytelling, but it's basically been the same match over and over again in different forms for like the last couple of months. So this thing needs to wrap itself up and come to an end at WrestleMania. Well, at this point, I was kind of ready for the women's chamber match, but then I forgot, oh yeah, there was a handicap match for the Intercontinental Championship. Braun Strowman in a 3-on-1 disadvantage against Sami Zayn, Cesaro, and Shinsuke Nakamura. A match where any of the three men who pinned Braun would win the championship. The match was nothing. I forgot about it, so I wasn't paying attention to it until I finally did, and then the finish just shocked me. Sami Zayn was kind of entertaining throughout the match, running away from Braun, but it was really nothing special. But the finish saw Braun charging at Cesaro in the corner, but Cesaro sidestepped him. Braun charged himself right into the steel post. The referee has back turned, and while on the apron, Nakamura hit a Kinshasa on Braun and kind of Kinshasa'd his head right into the steel post. Nakamura and Cesaro got Braun up for a suplex, held him up there for Sami Zayn to collide with a haluva kick, suplex him, slam down. Sami Zayn pins Braun to win the Intercontinental Championship. So for the first time since coming up to the main roster in 2016, Sami Zayn is finally a champion on the main roster. Good for him. It's very good for him. I can't really say I care. Once upon a time, I did care about Sami Zayn, and I did care about Cesaro, and I did care about Nakamura, and I did care about Braun Strowman. But the fact that I forgot this match was even happening on this show that had nothing but basically mid-card matches all throughout the entire thing, I still forgot about this match on this show, proves that I just don't really care. I like Sami Zayn enough still to, be happy for him winning a championship finally. But it's just like Braun Strowman finally won a championship a few weeks ago when he first won the IC title. And it's like, I didn't really care about that either. I was happy that he won a title finally, but it's like, I don't really care. Plus, I fully expect Braun to just win the belt back on SmackDown this week. So, we'll see. Then finally, the main event. The women's Elimination Chamber match. The winner will go on to WrestleMania to face Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship. The competitors consisted of Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan, Liv Morgan, Natalya, Asuka, and Shayna Baszler. This was the Shayna Baszler show in this match. You had the three former members of the Riott Squad. You thought maybe we'd get a spot with the three of them. Nope. It didn't last long enough. Ruby Riott and Natalya started out. Eventually Sarah Logan came in, was a house of fire, but everything changed once Shayna Baszler got in. She took down Ruby, she took down Sarah Logan, locked Sarah Logan in the Karafuda clutch, and Sarah Logan immediately tapped out. She goes over to Ruby Riott, locks her in the clutch, immediately, feverishly taps out. She sets her sights on Natalya, beats her down, punishes the hell out of her. She wedged her in the pod and slammed the door repeatedly into Natalya. It looked pretty brutal. And then eventually she locked Natty in the Karafuda clutch. And I don't know if she tapped or passed out. No, I'm pretty sure she tapped. So Natty tapped. So Shayna, within minutes, maybe even seconds of her getting into the match, she took out Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan, and Natalya. 3 quick, lightning, rapid-fire eliminations for her. But we're still counting down the time, waiting for the next entrant, and there is a lot of stalling. I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. This is kind of unique. It went on forever. They say there's 5-minute intervals. Well, they held true to that, and 5 minutes never felt so long because the amount of times we saw Asuka in her pod talking shit in Japanese, which was funny. Liv Morgan ready to come in on the other side, and Shayna just kind of walking back and forth, taunting both of them, posing for the crowd. It became old real fast, and unfortunately it wasn't the last time that this happened. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, Liv Morgan finally got into the match, but she got dominated real quick. Shayna held her upside down, slammed her head into the chain wall and then slammed her head very viciously into the pod on the side of her. It just looked and sounded brutal. She goes up to the other side of the ring, is up on the turnbuckle, and locks Liv in the clutch while she's hanging from the top of the turnbuckle. So she's kind of hanging there in the air. It looked brutal, and Liv passed out. And so then Shayna is just waiting for Asuka. And we're all waiting for Asuka, but it's taking a lifetime for Asuka to get into the match because they're sticking true to the 5-minute intervals. How many years of Royal Rumble matches where they say there's 90-second intervals or whatever, and they never hold true to that? Here, I'm basically begging you, lie. Pretend like it's 5 minutes. And just after the elimination, say, hey, come on in. But no, they were trying to be true to it. Eventually, Asuka got in. She was chomping at the bit to get in there, and she finally did. And she's competitive with Shayna. She even manages to lock Shayna in the Asuka lock. But Shayna is kind of rolling out of the ring and rolling through it. Both get to a standing vertical position, so Shayna can kind of knock Asuka back into the chain wall, and then she kept pushing Shayna into the wall. Asuka had an injured wrist heading into this match, so Shayna targeted that, started to pull back on the wrist, and then she locked Asuka in the Karafuda clutch, and Asuka eventually passed out, and Shayna Baszler won, winning what is quite possibly the shortest Elimination Chamber match in history, and Shayna Baszler becomes the first person to win a chamber match by eliminating every single other competitor in the match. Props to them making Shayna look like a monster, but a few problems. One, it just came off so flat because there was so much stalling in between the entries. You know, she took out all the women, and then it takes a lifetime for the next person to come in. So all this stalling is coming on. It's not like she's getting on the mic and cutting a promo. It's not like anyone's coming out and doing it. It's just her standing and walking around and the person in the pod screaming and all that kind of stuff. So nothing's happening. The fans, this is a Philly crowd. They're not really reacting all that much. They weren't really reacting to a whole lot on this show outside of a few spots in the tag chamber match and the Undertaker and I think Kevin Owens, and that was probably about it. But they weren't really reacting to a whole lot in this match, and quite frankly, why would they? Why would they? But, to be fair, we all knew Shayna Baszler was going to win this match anyway. So, I guess they figured, well, she's winning. Everyone knows she's winning, so let's make her look as dominant as possible. And you know what? They did. She eliminated every other woman in that match and came out on top. I just think the intentions were good. The execution was not. It was not at all. But it was very innovative. We've had a few squash matches be main events of pay-per-views. Hell, one of the biggest of all time, SummerSlam 2014. Brock Lesnar squashed the hell out of John Cena. So we've seen this before, but one person dismantling 5 other people in one match, it was a sight to behold. And I just don't think it was that well executed. But the intentions were there, and Shayna Baszler looked like a monster, and hopefully she looks like a monster at WrestleMania. Right now they have Becky cocky as ever. She's calling herself the GOAT. She's coming out on Raw dressed like friggin' Elton John, just cockier than ever. I say let that cockiness blow up in her face, go to WrestleMania, and within 5-8 minutes get choked out and pass out to Shayna Baszler to win the championship. Shayna should win the title anyway. Becky's going on a year with this belt. It's time for her to lose it. I say let Shayna basically dominate her, lock her in the clutch, make her pass out, win the championship, and then let Becky take a break for a while. Maybe a month, maybe 2. Then bring Becky back, absence makes the heart grow fonder, build her back up, and build to a rematch, a actual competitive back and forth match between the two, maybe at SummerSlam in August. I think that would be an interesting direction to go. But with how strong Shayna was booked here, she has to win. She has to win the championship at WrestleMania. She has to. There's no other option. So yeah, the finish of the main event itself and the finish of this show was not the strongest it could have been, but overall the show was really good. It was a very strong show. Like I said, the tag team chamber match really made this show. That was an excellent match. It did not start out that way, but it slowly but surely became an excellent match, and there was a lot of other really good matches on the show too. So I have to give it a thumbs up. If I had to rate it, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6.5 or 6 3/4, but somewhere around that realm. Next up is WrestleMania. Of course, we have Takeover before that, but all systems go for WrestleMania. So that's it for me here. Check me out and watch out for any other videos that might pop up on the YouTube channel here in the future. But until next time, take care.